please introduce yourself to the Clergy Talk podcast audience?
My name is Jason Dezember from Huntington Beach, California. I'm co-author with Joe Jordan on our new book, Piercing the Cosmic Veil.
Right.
And I'm here as, I guess, as your guest tonight. And hopefully I can tell you a little bit about my story and how I got here and answer any questions that you guys in your audience might have today.
Okay, not a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over with you and start wherever you choose.
Sounds good. You ready to go?
Yes, I am.
So my story's pretty unique in the way that I didn't expect to be doing this. I didn't expect to co-author a book this last year. So this has been something that's really changed my life. I appreciate you having me on, Mike. And I just want to tell a little bit again about, how this all came to fruition. So I came to Christ when I'm 40, I'll be 49 in April, but when I was about 10 or 11, I asked Jesus Christ into my heart. I went to a private Christian school from kindergarten to fourth grade.
Okay.
And parents were divorced when I was 4. So they were bouncing me kind of back and forth. I ended up with my mother. And at the age of about 11, she ended up getting raped by someone from the church at gunpoint while I was in the house. So this was kind of, I think, the pivotal point in my life where, I was angry.
Right.
I saw a lot of hypocrisy through that whole ordeal. And I wanted to lash out. So I ended up doing just that. I ended up getting in a band when I was probably 13 years old. Ended up getting sent to my father's house, who I did not want to be with. And he was an unbeliever, very hard-nosed guy. He liked to, degrade my mother about being a Jesus freak, and she liked to degrade him about being a monster.
Wow. Okay.
So that's kind of how I grew up. It was kind of on eggshells, kind of between both of them. Got through high school, had an opportunity to go to Boston College of Music, and I ended up squashing that and deciding to stay here with the band that I was in. And I ended up doing, for about 5 or 6 years, I was just really playing in rock bands and kind of vagabonding around and just kind of going through life, kind of searching. I kind of had put the biblical aspects of my childhood behind me. I was angry, just full of anger and resentment towards my father and my mother. And ergo, I ended up getting into a lot of bad relationships. So without getting too far into, all of that, I did end up getting married pretty young. I had my first child when I was about 27. She just turned 23. Was married for 4 years. Ironically enough, like my father, I ended up getting divorced when she was 4, and ended up leaving her. Got very quickly with another woman, and was with her for about 11, 12 years. Had 2 more children with her, and ended up getting a divorce with her just after the crash in 2008.
Oh wow! Okay.
So yeah. So 2 failed marriages. A lot of drug use, a lot of worldly use, a lot of alcohol. Got that kind of probably influenced in through my father. He was definitely very abusive, I guess, when I was really young with my mother. And unfortunately, as you walk away from the Lord, you're either serving, we know that you're either serving the Lord or you're serving the enemy. So a lot of that ended up being, I think, a reason for what happened to me. And at that point, this was about 2000. Let's see, I got the second divorce in about 2010, 2011, and my ex-wife had taken my 3- and 4-year-old up to San Francisco, about 8 hours away.
Okay.
Lost the house, like I think 1 out of 4 Americans, I think, in 2008, during the housing crash, ended up losing their home. So lost the house. Bad year for a lot of people. A lot of divorce, a lot of things happened obviously because of that. So ended up alone. She took them up north, lost the house, lost the cars, lost any of the assets that we had. I mean, really came to a point at that time where for the first time in my life, I had to face being alone and really have to face myself because I didn't have anything left. I had lost everything at this point.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
So that's where I was. I ended up moving into renting a room out in Westminster, California, with a couple elderly women. They rented a little office space out to me. I was a mortgage banker at the time. Wasn't really doing real well at work. I was using at the time. Was doing a lot of drinking. I was finding myself very depressed. I think I was going. Some might call it clinically depressed. Just having, not a relationship with really any of my immediate family, my mother or father. Then having the children that were, in your life, and those years being taken away, really left at a point of nothing. Like here I am, and there's nothing.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
completely vulnerable and open. So,
like, what's next? Come on, let's do it.
Exactly. Like what's happening here? So, yeah. So, I think this is the part where things started to get strange. This is where things got strange when I was living in this home. I ended up on my own accord. I was getting to a point where the drugs weren't working. Like they just didn't work anymore.
Wow.
The alcohol didn't work anymore. And I started for the first time in my life, I started getting suicidal thoughts, and I had never had that before. I always thought that I looked down upon people who did that. I had, that was my mentality. Hey, you're weak, and how could anybody ever feel like that? And
right.
Well, it came to a point in my life where I started having these slow, methodical feelings of despair that turned into, I'm really nothing's working, and I don't know what to do at this point. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to kick the drug use and kick the alcohol, and I'm going to jump back in, and I'm going to see if God can help me, because I was at a point that was so scary that I knew something had to be done, because I didn't want to go in that direction, because I didn't want to leave the kids behind. I think the only reason why I ended up not doing something severe is because the little ones, and I mean, I've got 3 children, and I kept thinking, if I do this could have some really bad effects on the rest of their lives. So
exactly. Yeah.
By the grace of God, I chose not to do it. However, I was listening to a lot of the local radio stations with the pastors. Like there's 2 or 3 stations that have just all pastors speaking, a lot of worship music all the time. So I started listening to the worship music and listening to the pastors, and got a Bible, and I started just digging into the Word on my own. And this went on for probably 4 to 5 weeks. Just being clean and just saying, hey, none of this is working. I really got to shift and see if God can help me, because really this is it's the only thing I can imagine that it might work.
Right.
So with that said, in that 4 to 5 week period, I started to feel a draw that I had never felt before. And I can only explain it as maybe the Holy Spirit, where I felt like for the first time in my life, which was different from when I was a young child, like I was about to make this connection with God. Like something was happening. Like and in retrospect, I can see that it was the Holy Spirit drawing me in, and something was about to happen. And I felt like I was going to get some resolution to the abandonment issues, to the anger issues, to the unforgiveness issues that I was harboring, and the clinical depression. So I was right. I felt something just was going to change, and I was very hopeful. Well, I worked in, so right as this was happening, I ended up dropping a friend off. I worked on the weekend sometimes in the office. I'd go in the office and work a few hours, and I ended up going in on a Sunday. It was October 6, 2013. I dropped a friend off at her workplace in Irvine, California. She was working from like 12 to 8, and I figured, I'm gonna drop you off. She didn't have a ride at the time, so I was helping her out, get back and forth to her home where she was living close by me. Right. So I ended up dropped her off and ended up going to the office for a few hours. Ended up being longer than I thought, and during that day, I had these windows that look out of the office where I'm sitting, and I could see you could see pretty clearly all the way to the coast. And above Hoag Hospital, I could see what appeared to be, I kept seeing this light. And I'd look at it and think, well, that's really weird. That must, something kept drawing me to it though through the evening. And as it got darker, it got brighter, and I kept looking at it just thinking, what is going on? What is this light? I mean, this is big. This isn't a star. It's way too low to be it's not a plane. It's been sitting there. It's gotten bigger. It's gotten smaller, but it's really positioned itself, maybe 100 feet above this hospital. So I end up, not thinking much of it at the time, ended up driving to pick her up at 8 o'clock. So I left the office, closed that down, ended up getting to her place. Got there a little bit early, so I was waiting in front of the place that she worked at, and I was watching this thing, and it was much, much closer at this point, and it would get super brilliant, like a sun, like a mini sun, and then it would shrink down. And, and I was watching this thing. It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. And the security lady who was kind of watching the perimeter of this place, I called her over, and she saw it. She's like, wow, man, that's unbelievable. What is that? So she saw, I've got some video camera stuff. I'm going to go home and grab a video camera and come back. And I'm like, well, okay, we'll do whatever you got to do. But I wanted some validation at the time because it was pretty interesting.
Right.
So, yeah. So after the, I don't know, some time went by. She ended up not coming back, and it was about 5 minutes to my friend getting out of work, and I had been waiting there for probably 25 to 30 minutes, and I was really excited to show her what was going on, because at this point, what was happening was this light would shrink in, and it would dissipate into nothing, but then it would show itself over here to the left, and then it would do the same thing. It would get very bright, and it would suck itself in. Incredible. It would do that, and then it would shift to the right, and I was getting really excited, never seen anything like this. So she ends up coming out, and as they're letting the employees out, this thing disappears for the last time, and it's gone. It was amazing. I was angry because I wanted her, my friend, to see this thing, and I've been waiting to show her, and it just disappeared. So we're having this conversation. And I'm like all excited, telling her all about this light, and I'm waiting, and I'm like, let's just sit here for a few minutes to see what's going to happen. Maybe this thing will come back. So we wait, kind of get in a little bit of an argument, not too bad, but just I was excited, and she wanted to go, and the thing wasn't appearing again. So I ended up, we ended up leaving. So she was also did not have a vehicle. I would let her drive my truck at certain times. She wanted to drive, so we would do this thing back and forth, just trying to help this person out. And she ended up driving that evening, and we were going to go back to her house to drop her off, and then I would take my truck and come home. So we get in the truck, and we pull out of this parking lot, and we come up Newport Boulevard to get on the freeway to head north on the 405. And as we come up north on, it must have been 8:15. We come up north on the Newport Boulevard, and it's dark at this time. It's almost 8:30, and as I'm sitting in the passenger seat, the girl who's on with puts her hand over and goes, "Oh my gosh!" She was extremely excited, extremely I'm like, it was intense. Like what's going on? So she crosses her hand over mine. I look up in the sky, and I see. And for your audience, I hate to sound, it's going to sound incredible, but it's just what happened. I don't know what to tell people. It is what it is. I looked up, and there was a ship in the sky, and it was coming towards us. It was coming from a distance towards us, and it was huge. It was absolutely huge. I would say, I tell people that, if you were to go to a strip mall, a small strip mall, or maybe the size of a couple football fields long, well, I would say maybe a football field and a half long. And it was a square ship. It wasn't anything, with crazy shapes. It was really in a square structure. And I immediately had never, I just, at that moment in time, everything shifted and everything went to tunnel vision. And I told her, pull over the truck. So we pull over the truck. We end up going over like a little center divider, coming into a parking lot. I come out of the truck and this thing is now coming from the north, coming from the east towards the west, going towards the ocean, coming towards us. As it's coming towards us, there's no sound whatsoever at all. This thing is massive, but there's literally no sound. I hear nothing. I'm just watching this thing, and it's almost as if, and I've told people through my testimony throughout this last year, as it was almost like it seemed as it was moving in water. It had this movement of being in water, and it had 3 lights on one side, vertical, and 3 lights on the other side. I could see the metal fabrication under the ship. And obviously at this time, I felt like it was almost like being in a Star Wars movie, or like being in a blockbuster movie, because you've got this thing that's coming over your head and it's so massive. I found myself screaming up at it, and she was back towards the truck a little bit. And I'll never forget looking up and just saying, "What are you? What are you?" And as it passed over me and I yelled at it, I remember it stopping just after I yelled at it, and I went and it started to go in reverse back towards over my head. At that point, I was filled with fear, total, absolute fear. At that moment, I looked towards the area where it had come from, and 3 more of these ships were coming out of the distance, coming towards us. I jump in the car. I tell her to get in the truck. We basically rip out of this parking lot, take Newport Boulevard to PCH, Pacific Coast Highway, and start heading north. So at this point, I'm thinking to myself, I don't even know. When you're in these situations, you're caught. You're hysterical. You're full of hysterics. Like you don't. It was absolutely unworldly what was happening. And as we get on PCH and start going north, I look to my right over the land, and the ocean is over to our left as we're going north. And I see these lights that I had seen earlier, these bright lights, but I could see them. They were everywhere. Mike, there must have been 20, I could count 20 or 30 of them as far as the eye could see, from as north as I could see all the way to the south as I could see. And I, at that point, thought, okay, we're under attack. This is an armada of ships, of spaceships, and I don't know what's going on, but this is absolutely incredible. Over our head, just over my head, at the same time I'm seeing all these lights in the distance. And what's interesting is a lot of these lights, they weren't moving and flying around. It seemed as though they were sitting stationary above buildings. Anything that was a big structure, these lights were hovering above the structures as you looked inland, which made me think that they're monitoring and something's getting ready to happen here. And it was very intense, very intense. And then to make things worse, more ships came. To my right, where I was in the passenger section, the disc ships came. There was a group of them. I don't know. There were probably 3 to 5, and I really can't remember, but I know there were more than 3. I would say between 3 to 5 of these disc-shaped ships, and they were flying, could have been 50 to 75 feet above our head, tracking us, paralleling us in the car. I could see the fabrication of these discs, and as they're spinning, metallically, I could see their shape, but they were spinning on the outside one way as they flew, and on the inside there were blue lights, and they were spinning the opposite way. So it was as if it was spinning, moving, but there was an inside light spinning and moving. And at this time, her and I are screaming, we're freaking out. I grabbed my cell phone, and ironically enough, not to take a picture or to videotape anything, I started calling people that I knew, because I've lived in the area my whole life. So I started calling my uncle. I started calling the women who I was renting the room in, primarily because I was convinced that we were under attack. Not knowing that as these people answered, hearing me frantic, and they're going, I called my uncle, I called the women that I was living with. I think that was it. I tried some other people, but nobody answered. Both of those people came out of their homes, And where they were, they would have for surely seen those lights that I'm talking about, the bright lights in the distance. But they said, Jason, we just don't see anything.
Whoa, wait a minute now. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
They saw nothing?
Nothing. So now I'm just the confusion. Like, how can you not see what we've just experienced and what we've just witnessed? How can you not see this when I can see the lights right over where you're living? I mean, there's no way that somebody could have not come out of their home and seen what I was looking at. That was just the way. That's how it was. So we're coming up PCH. The disc ships had flown this way. The sunlight things that moved, if they were not over a structure, they moved through the sky, but they moved at a very slow, fluid rate. No sound. The discs had no sound. Nothing had sound. And we're both frantic. And I'm basically thinking that it's the end of the world. I mean, what can I tell you? You experience something like that, and you're thinking it's the end of the world for sure. So the icing on the cake comes to this point. We're about halfway to Warner, where we need to cut to the right to go inland towards her place, which is up in Garden Grove. As you're traveling up PCH, there are oil rigs about 2 to 3 miles, 3 to 5 miles out off the coast. This was a clear night, completely clear night in October, very crisp. And you could see the lights of the oil rigs as you travel down the coast.
Okay.
So shortly after the phone calls and the disc ships flew past, the girl who was with me screamed and started cursing like I had never heard her react the way that she was reacting. And she grabbed me because I'm looking at all the stuff that's happening to my right. She grabs me and pulls me and she said, "Oh my God, what is this?" And over the I've done a testimony of Mike. I've done a testimony in a few months, so bear with me. It's sometimes when I have a delay and I speak of it, it blows my mind because over how soon us humans forget things, right? My 7-year anniversary of this incident was obviously this last October, 7 years, and took quite a few to get through the trauma. Still have the PTSD or whatever you want to call it. Right. But it's just interesting how I'm visualizing it right now because I'm thankful that I still can remember everything because it's so other. I mean, it's just an incredible story. So as we're going, she says, "Oh my God!" Basically, look, and she grabs my shirt. I pull over. I look over her, and I see over the oil rigs cylinders. If you've ever had a hot tamale, the little red hot candies, I would say that that's what they were shaped like, and they were vertical, and they were huge, and they were stationary. And they were massive, and they all you could see was the shape of them, and they glowed like a light that I can only explain would be like a neon orange or a neon yellow. It was so brilliant and so bright that it's almost hard to tell you how brilliantly bright these things were, and they were humongous. And there was one positioned over the oil rig, one positioned adjacent to it a little bit higher. And then there was one position adjacent to it a little bit lower. Once that happened, I started freaking out a lot because so
understandable. Wow.
I was freaking out a lot. My goal at this point was, what's going on? And I have to get somebody else to see what I'm seeing. That's all I could think was, I've got to get somebody. I mean, Dulce's here with me, and praise God I have a witness through this whole thing, because if I didn't, I can only imagine how much more flack or how much more difficult it would be for people to believe this. So I'm so very thankful, but I wanted more. I wanted people to see what was going on. Right. So as we came up to the street that we needed to get off of PCH, there were no more. We had left those ships behind. The dish ships were gone. The big ones that this whole thing had started with were gone. Now it was just those sunlights that were everywhere. I mean, they didn't go anywhere. They just were everywhere. They were everywhere as far as you could see in the night sky. we pull off of Warner, we come up, and I tell her, pull over to the next gas station that you see. Because I'm going to go up, and I'm going to grab people, and I'm going to say, do you see what I'm seeing? That's my goal. So
yeah.
She pulled it over at a
I mean, you need confirmation from somebody. Yeah.
Confirmation. Yeah. We need confirmation. We're not going insane.
Right.
Whatever's going on is crazy.
Wow.
So we end up, she pulls over to this first gas station, and there was a lady and her daughter. They were for some reason, the mother was pumping daughter. The daughter was there standing with her, and there were some other people. She parked the car. I went up to the mother and the daughter, and I said, excuse me, guys, just real quick question. Have you seen any of these lights in the sky tonight, these strange lights? And when I did that, it's almost as if they looked up and they did see, and it was almost as if from the time that this whole thing started, it seemed like I was witnessing things, but everybody else were like, they were in a sleep mode. Like nobody was. I had to show people what was happening, and once they made contact with their eyes, then I could see that were seeing them, and the girl was like, "Oh my gosh, Mom, look!" And that was enough for me. I ran in the car, and she ended up continuing towards her house. Oh. So at this point, we're close to her home. And there was just before her place, there was a In-N-Out hamburger joint next to a gas station that had like an AM PM attached to it, so you could get things in there or what have you. So she was on empty at the time, and she was going to get gas. And as we pull into this last stop before we were going to get to her place, I look over and there's a line to go in the In-N-Out, and there's a cop car. And I had to talk to the police officer. I had to let him know. I had to let him know what was going on. I had to let
that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't want to freak anybody out, and I was extremely excited. I had to control myself to wind myself down, because I'm a salesman. I didn't want to. I needed to compose myself before addressing the police officer.
Exactly.
Which is exactly what I did. And as he's in line with these cars, and the gas station and the burger joint they're right next to each other. So I walked over. She ended up walking over with me, and I said, "Listen, I'm going to let him know what's going on." So he's in line, and his passenger window's down, and there's cars. I think he was the last car in line. There were some cars in front of him as he was waiting. I slowly went up to the police car, and I said, "Excuse me, officer, real quick. I have a question for you. Can I talk to you?" And he looked down, and he said, "Come this way." He says, "Come here." So we both come up, and I said, "Listen, I need to let you know that I just picked up my friend here in Newport Beach. We drove about 13 miles up here to Westminster, 13, 15 miles, whatever it is. And we experienced a bunch of these, these ships and these lights. In fact, there's some, so as I'm talking to him and I'm staying kind of distant from the cop car, I can see that one of these sunlights is coming slowly towards us. So I was thankful, because I just needed, it would give me some validation for him to see it. So I said, "Hey, this is what's going on. I'm not on drugs. This is my friend. I've got 3 kids. I've got a wife. I work as a mortgage banker. You can check my credentials. I'm not an ex-con.
Right.
I got nothing going on. I just need to let you know what's going on." So he says, "Come here a little closer." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You need to calm down." So obviously, as composed as I was, I obviously wasn't. I obviously was very excited. So he got me closer to the passenger window, and he said, "I've got a couple calls tonight about something, but I'm not really sure what you're talking about." As if he justified it vaguely, but then said, "I'm not sure what you're talking about." So at that moment, I said, "Well, officer," I said, "one of these lights is right over your head. If you just turn your head to the left, I'll back away from the squad car, and you look up, there's one right here. Will you please do that?" The moment I challenged him to do that, he would not turn around. Then he said, "Come here closer." And he said, I don't want you to say anything more about this right now. And I want you and your girlfriend to get in your car. Where do you live? And I said, she lives about a mile down the street. And she said, okay, I want you to get in the car and I want you to go home and I don't want you to talk to anybody else about this tonight. Does that make sense? And I looked at him and I said, what do you mean? Does that make sense? I said, I'm asking, I need some help here. I'm having this is
well,
insane.
I'm lost.
Exactly. So, when that happened, a couple things. I was shocked. I knew that he knew what was going on because he wouldn't look to his left. He wouldn't look at where I needed him to look. All he did was turn his head, and he would not turn his head. And when he threatened to take us or have somebody come out, and because that was the threat, it was after he told us to get in the car and not speak of it again and to go home, he reiterated the fact. I challenged him a bit and said, what are you talking about? I need your help right now. And he said, listen, I'm not going to ask you again. If I have to ask you again, I'm going to have somebody come out here and take you guys. Get in your cars and leave. So that's what we did. I'll never forget that. As that was just a horrible thing to happen when you're going through something like that, and you're really looking for. You look to your people as in authority as someone that might be able to help you, and even then there was no help available. So it was just
that has to be part of the playbook. That has to be part of the playbook, you know, because you know, when people have a playbook design and say, if this happens, you have to respond this way regardless.
That's what I thought. I thought to myself, well, this is compartmentalized now. I know if he knows what's going on and he's a beat cop, then if he's been, knowing that the police officer knew what was going on, that's a scary proposition.
Yes, it is.
That's a really scary proposition. So, continue here. I end up going to her place. We ended up watching those lights for a while, and that was it. I don't really remember that night. I obviously didn't sleep very well. I actually think I had a few beers at her place. I actually slept there I think I passed out on the floor there, woke up, set my alarm. I think I slept a few hours. We talked for a while. I really don't remember what happened other than having a couple of beers, falling asleep, and I knew I had to be at work the next day. So I got up in the morning, and obviously after shutting the blinds and getting the place locked up and just trying to unwind from what we had just experienced, I got to work early a lot, and I opened up the office. So same thing in the morning. But when I woke up in the morning, I had this feeling of like helplessness. Like I felt like, okay, I'll never forget driving to work. I ended up getting there about 6 o'clock in the morning. On the way there, I almost called the police department, and my roommate at the time told me, I'm glad you didn't, because that was the last people you want to talk to. And she was right. Obviously, if the cop didn't want to hear it, God knows what they would have done if I would have called the police station. And I remember on the way to work that morning, I had my phone and I was going to do it, but I didn't. And I ended up getting to work, and I remember sitting on the steps where you go into the building. I think it was like a 5-6 story building, or different offices in it. And then it had a couple parking structures, different businesses were in there. And it had a section where where UPS and FedEx drivers would come and do their deliveries and pickups. So I sat there. I was smoking cigarettes at the time. So I was there. I was having a cigarette in the morning, and I broke down, Mike, and I just started bawling. I felt like, what we're human. I'm insignificant. My life is insignificant. Us humans are insignificant. I just witnessed the most insane thing that anyone could witness in their entire life. Right. Why is anything even the way it is if what I just witnessed is real? Why this? And I just had this overwhelming sense of despair again. And I remember looking up and saying to God, I remember cursing him and crying and saying, how could you let that happen to me when I was that close to having a relationship with you that 4 to 5 weeks before this had happened?
Wow.
So I went from having almost a connection with God again to having this whole ordeal throw me into a tailspin. I went as far away from God, and my goal at that point was, I'm going to figure out what happened. I'm going to figure out what these things are. How, you know, religion started to take a back seat, because now you're thinking, okay, we're all messed up. Nobody knows anything, because what I just witnessed is something that is going to throw people, like, everything's going to change everybody's reality. Like, our reality doesn't mean anything.
That's understandable. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I can relate to that 100%. Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. So that leads me into what I call 2 to 3 years of the most intense. You know, I probably won't get into everything on the show, because if I spent the time to do it, it would really, I mean, it would go on and on. There's some other video interviews and there's some information in the book that we have, but to kind of condense things, what had happened at that point was I got into an obsession with what had happened to me, why it happened to me, and what I was going to do about it. Nothing else. I couldn't relate to anybody after that happened. I couldn't relate to anybody. Like, and no one could, other than the girl I was with. Either people, when that happens to you and you have conversations like this, you have to be very careful with who you're talking to, because people are going to think you're nuts.
Right.
And
it's like, if you haven't been down the rabbit hole like me, I really don't want to talk to you.
Pretty much. Or I mean, I'm sure, and you know, people like you and people like Joe and obviously other people who, other experiencers obviously can relate to me, but for the most part, you've got to really pick your poison and know who you're talking to.
Exactly.
So I ended up getting really, I ended up getting to a position where I had this overwhelming feeling of, I got to get out. I'm done. I didn't want to kill myself, but I didn't want to be alive. I didn't know where to go, and I didn't know what to do, but I had this overwhelming nagging feeling that I needed to go to the mountains. I got to get out of here. I got to go to the mountains, and I got to get away from everybody. And you know what? I have a pretty significant commission check coming in a week. And I think I'm going to take that commission check, cash it, take my guitar, take my backpack with some clothes, get in my Ford Explorer. I'm going to drive north. I'm going to go and leave here. I'm never coming back. Whatever happens, happens. When I run out of money, I run out of money. When I run out of gas, I run out of gas. When I can't walk anymore, I can't walk anymore. And when I end up with nothing, and I end up, I guess it would be, I had this grandeur of a passive suicide by putting myself in a vulnerable situation.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's where my mindset was, and I was going to do it. And the weird thing about it at the time, Mike, was I was comfortable with it. I was okay with that. I felt like I was okay with that. Happened. I had told a couple people in my family that I thought I could trust. They ridiculed me and made fun of me. Didn't believe me. That, and accompanied with what had happened through the divorce and the loss of the kids who I loved dearly with all my heart and soul, I was just like, there's no point anymore. So I'm going to just go ahead and do this. Nobody's looking for me anyway. I had lived I had almost lived in this office and rented this room out for almost 2 years, and no one in my family knew where I had lived. Couple friends knew where I lived, but they weren't the kind of friends that, you know, really needed to know where you lived.
Right.
There was a couple days before I was going to end up doing that, and I ended up going into a place with a friend, and there was a girl sitting there, and she was doing some art on a sketch pad, and I sat down next to her. It was actually a bar, and we were going to get a drink, and she was the only one in this bar, and she was by herself, and she was having sipping on a cocktail, and she looked like she knew what she was doing. I had no interest in anything at the time, but I ended up just with my friend sitting next to her at this bar, and we ended up getting a beer, and she made some small talk. I ended up going over to this gas station to get some snacks and peanuts or something like that. And I ended up bringing some popcorn and peanuts back. I sat down next to her and said, "Here's some snacks." Started talking. Really interesting girl. Someone who was different. She seemed like an intellect. She seemed like she had a head on her shoulders, something really different than I was used to. And really from a friendship level, there was a connection there. Ended up talking for a little bit and getting her number, ended up texting I think a few days later. And before I was going to go on my journey, I ended up giving her a call, and we ended up just hitting it off. And I always, I look back, after all this time, and I know that God put her in my life at the right time for the right reason. I always say that she's my angel, because when we started talking those nights before I was going to leave, it was those conversations where we could talk for hours. It was going on from, she was a bartender, I was a mortgage banker. My office, I had banker's hours. She had, she worked till 3:30 in the morning, but anytime we could speak, we were speaking. And my idea of leaving left. We started seeing each other, not in a romantic way, but for 2 to 3 weeks in a way that I needed. I needed a friend. I hadn't had a real relationship like that. So I hadn't told her what had happened yet, but there came a time where I knew that, listen, I'm not going to leave now. I have some interest in this person. And I had gone 2 years thinking I was, going to, in the most horrible despair you could ever be in. And now I've got someone I'm connecting with. So I'm going to put that on hold, and I'm going to continue to have a relationship with her. So we did. And, I knew that I needed to tell her what had happened, because this was only a few months after it had happened. And if I'm going to have a relationship with this person, it's going to come out, and she's either going to think you're a nutbag and she's going to walk away, or she's going to embrace it. She's going to believe you. So I sat her down one night and I said, listen, I need to talk to you. It's going to take about an hour and a half. I don't want you to say one word. I got something I got to tell you, and I just need you to listen to me. So she sat there, and I went on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And I ended up telling her what had happened. And she looked at me and she said, she came up to me, she hugged me. She said, I'm so sorry. I believe every word you said. And that just, it was the most, it was amazing. It was
you needed that. You needed that. Yeah.
I needed it. I needed that. So we ended up seeing each other for a few months, and she was actually out of a relationship, a marriage. I had come out of my situation. We weren't looking for anything but companionship. But we were living in these really awkward rooms in different cities, and it was not very conducive to us spending time together. So we decided to move in together.
Okay.
So we ended up getting an apartment in Fullerton, California. And we moved in, and that's when really the trouble started. I couldn't let what had happened go, and I was obsessing on it, and it was consuming me. I was on the internet. I was looking at UFOs. I was looking up different races, galactic federations. I was digging into Nibiru. I was digging, the Planet X. I was digging into the Nephilim. I'm digging into the Blue Avians. I'm dealing into the Genesis 6 narrative. I'm searching, and I'm going to find out what's going on. So during this time, I ended up getting laid off from my job shortly after we moved in together, which unfortunately gave me a lot of time to do research. Right. And I ended up focusing and spending a lot of time on the patio. I was having, over the course of 2 years, I was not only seeing ships and filming them in the evening, I was seeing orbs. I was having experiences where I could see through as I was videotaping or filming things, I could see entities of beings below on the ground when I was filming ships in the air. I was connected to the ISS application on my phone, in which I could see ships from the ISS. I witnessed things. So many otherworldly things happened to us at this Fullerton ship, or this Fullerton home. She started having sightings with me. We started having paranormal activity in the home. As this first year went on, it was almost like they were courting me. The more I wanted to know about what had happened to me, the more over time they would show and manifest things. It started off with the light ships, and then it would start off with with beings showing up in photos or videos that I would take. Then it ended up to them coming into real time. I had an encounter with different entities that showed themselves through my phone, and nothing had happened really real time over the first year as far as like something coming into my realm physically,
right,
except the ships. And then it slowly started with the orbs in the home and outside the home. And it got to a point where my girlfriend was getting very scared. She was experiencing a lot of the paranormal. She was seeing some of the things that I was experiencing, but not all of the things I was experiencing. And it got to a point where she got very upset and said, listen, you either got to put this phone down, put this videos down, and stop recording, stop taking pictures, stop talking about this. Or you got to choose. This stuff's too heavy for me, and you're obsessed with it. And I was. I couldn't stop seeking to figure out what had happened, and I wanted more. I wanted more. Well, for your audience out there, you need to be very careful with what you ask for, because pretty much everything that I wanted to know, I was shown. And over the course of this 2 years, it ended up getting to where it seemed innocent to a certain degree. I was fascinated with what was happening to me. But as time went on, I also was starting to feel fear and anxiety, and that started to manifest itself as things started to become more intense. So I think, to kind of jettison the story without getting into all the nuts and bolts of that 2 years, I'm going to go towards the end. We'll end it to where I actually got salvation from this situation, got saved from this position I was in, what had happened to that point, and then how I met Joe. So things were becoming more intense, much more intense, more ships, more beings, high freyness, people coming into our lives out of nowhere in public places and speaking to us about shapeshifters, about the secret space force. I'm starting to have relationships with people behind her back that know about these things, that have had experiences that came into my life randomly, and which I shouldn't have been doing. I was dabbling into. When she didn't want me to do these things, I was sneaking off and doing them anyway to try to figure out what I was going to continue to figure this out. And one night, this is when it got to, this is probably year two. This is year two. Things were getting super intense, and we came home from dinner or something, and she ended up going to sleep on the couch in the living room. And I ended up, when we had come home that night, I had seen this huge ship far in the distance, but because I had been watching and filming, and these things were, I would say, they're courting me, they're showing me more and more and more, I could pick them off. I mean, Mike, I could be anywhere at any given time, whether it was the day or the night, and if I just looked up in the sky without seeing or getting hearing something or looking up because of a noise, I could just look up randomly in the air, and when I did that, my eyes were on something, whether it was a humanoid, whether it was a ship, whether it was whether it was a group of orbs or whatever it may be. I mean, it was getting to a point where it was intense. And this night, I had seen that ship coming home. I didn't see anything to her because I didn't want to freak her out. So she falls asleep on the couch. I grab my phone. I sneak out the front door. I go through the apartment complex out to the carport, where there was a flower bed which was about 4 feet high, and it paralleled the apartment complex from the outside. So I snuck out, got out to the point, got up on this little flower bed, and I had my phone up, and I was filming this ship. Ship was far away, but it was huge because I could see that it was so big, but yet it was so far. So it really told me how big it really was. And as I'm watching it and filming it, I'm seeing these little lights come out of the bottom of it, and then they would go back in it, and come out of it, and they'd go back in it. And I was, again, just fascinated. And I'm watching this. I must have been out there for, I'd say, 40 minutes, just mesmerized by what I was seeing. All of a sudden, these things started coming further out of the ship and back in, and kind of further towards me and then back in. And over time, these things were getting a lot closer than I anticipated. And at the very end, these things came straight over the carport, probably 2 or 3 of them. And the last thing I remember was feeling a sense of extreme fear and jumping off the flower bed, and that's it.
Wow.
The next thing I knew, I'm sitting in my truck, and I get woken up abruptly, and my girlfriend is pounding on the window. What are you doing in there? She's pounding on the glass, and I'm just I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I don't even know what happened. I just know I'm in my truck. So I look up. She opens the door. I fall out of the truck, and she picks me up, helps me up. She's like, "It's 3:30 in the morning. What are you doing? Where have you been? You know, what's going on?" She takes me in the house. I get into bed. I wake up in the morning, and I don't know what time I'd woken up, but I went to get up out of bed, and I ended up putting my feet on the floor. And Mike, my feet had felt like, and my body had felt like I had gotten jumped by 8, 9 guys. I've been into a lot of fights, and I've been beat up by some gangs in my past, and I felt like I just dropped to my knees, and I felt like I got kicked by 7 or 8 guys, and my feet especially were just, I couldn't walk. I couldn't walk. I felt like my feet were broken. I remember going into the bathroom, and I sat down on the toilet. I was in my underwear only, and we all know our bodies. They're our bodies, and we know them. We've lived with them our whole lives. And I looked down, and my hair had been cut on the inside of my thighs all the way up to my privates on both sides of my legs. I had what appeared to be a puncture wound in the inside of my left ankle, and I had a triangle pattern of 3 dots, 1, 2, 3 on my left thigh. So at that moment, I'm once again, I'm like, okay, now this has gone to another level that I'm not cool with. Like I've been touched.
Exactly. Wow.
Something happening now. So this wasn't good. Very, very fearful, very full of fear. I felt, man, I had never felt like that before in my life. I ended up getting out of the bathroom. I went out to the patio where I sat all the time, and I started, of course, like we do, self-diagnosing. I went to abduction images, and everything I'm seeing is everything that's on my body. So I'm devastated. I feel I can only explain to people that, like, I'm not a woman, so I don't know what it's like to be raped, but I do know that when something happens to you physically and you know that you've been violated in that way, whether you're a man or a woman, it's something that is extremely traumatic. And I was at a new level of fear, a new level of despair, and it was really affecting us. So I started to kind of jettison and move forward. Her and I had some serious conversations at that point, and we ended up, I had to get answers then for sure. So we ended up finding a world-renowned hypnotherapist from LA named Yvonne Smith. I don't know how I came across her, but I needed to get answers. So she was in LA, and I ended up tracking her down, and I was able to have her meet me at her, ironically enough, her Newport Beach office, about a half a mile where this whole thing started. And I went there, and she videotaped me. She charged me $250 an hour. So I ended up, I think, spending $500 to get this thing done, which was absolutely ridiculous. But at the time, I didn't care about money or anything. I need a professional or somebody who had some idea about this stuff. I got to figure something out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So she had some doctor there that took out implants or something like that. I don't know who he was. We didn't do any of that stuff. It was just basically my testimony. She filmed me, she recorded me, and similarly to what we're doing now, I gave her my entire testimony up to that point. And so that got done. She talked to me. She said, this happens. This is common. I hear these things over and over again, and she she basically drew me in even more to this whole realm of alien abduction and stuff of this nature. And I didn't really feel like I got any, I didn't feel like I got any justification from doing it. However, that a couple of days later, she ended up sending me an email with this packet of paperwork saying, you may want to consider doing hypnotherapy so we can go back and figure out what happened to you that night. And that was a conversation that we had to have, Katie and I had to have, because I'm a hothead. Obviously, I've changed considerably. My whole life has changed, and he's changed me. I'm a new creature, but at the time, kind of a hothead, got a bit of anger in me. And we thought that, if I go in that direction, and the paperwork she sent was very detailed. Listen, if you do this and you decide to have me do this hypnotherapy, this could change your life forever. It could change your girlfriend, your potential wife, your family. It's going to be something that could really manifest, and you've got to really need to think about this before you do it. So her and I chose not to do it, just because she's like, I can't take anymore, and I know you can't take anymore. And if we end up finding out what happened, I don't know what your reaction's going to be, and this could go into a whole nother level of insanity right at this time. So we started going to these MUFON meetings. I started trying to reach out to these UFO, anywhere that you could like document UFO sightings, or where people like MUFON is that, obviously the biggest UFO network in the world. Joe Jordan obviously had him on your show some time back, and he's the national director for South Korea. And I went to this in Orange County, and over there, I forgot where it was, but we ended up going to a couple of these meetings, and I ended up reaching out to some of these people, these meetings, and they almost, it was almost like I was alien there myself. Nobody wanted to help me. I asked a couple of people, is there anybody you could talk to about like a recent, I had an abduction situation. Everybody just wanted to sell their books or sell their, or give their speeches. And we went 2 or 3 times, and I was just not getting, I couldn't find help anywhere. Like we couldn't figure out, we didn't know what we were going to do. It was causing so much terror, and things were continuing to happen in the home. Missing items, horrible smells, the orbs were still coming around. I mean, it was still continuing in conjunction with where we were at. You have a question?
Now, the smells is a red flag, because that's connected with a whole bunch of stuff. Awful smells, that's connected with so much stuff. I can't even keep up with all the stuff that's connected with.
I believe that, because there was a time where there was a few days and we couldn't figure it out, and it was and the frequency in the home, and the high frayness, and the paranormal activity when we had that couple of days where we had that stench. It was insane. Computers getting wiped out.
Wow.
I'm recording. I've got just things happening that just don't happen.
Right.
So
right.
I do agree with you there.
Wow.
So, moving forward, we're about 2.5 years into this nightmare, and my girlfriend at the time decided to go to Arizona to visit her sister because one of her nieces was having a birthday, and I decided not to go. So she was going to be gone a couple days. She left, and it was let me think here. May, it was I don't know what day, but it was May 2016, and I was alone. It was about midnight, and I was in the living room watching television. And if you've ever lived in an apartment, everybody out there's lived in an apartment, that we've all got these patented vertical blinds that you can spin, and they're in most apartments, and they're put into sliding glass doors out to a patio or something like that. So when I'm sitting in my couch, I've got my patio to my right, and I've got my vertical blinds, which were shut. And I looked over to my right, and it must have been between midnight or 12:30, and I could see red eyes about 3 feet tall, just beaming eyes, a set of 3 or 4 of them at the door. So at this time, I went into like a state of, I don't think I can even explain the terror that I felt when that happened. Like I've almost died a few times in my life prior to all this madness, and I've had some near-death experiences and things like that. This was over the top because I knew that they had finally come and manifested into real time. You know, it took all this other stuff, and they're here. They're at the door. They're right at the door, and I know that they're there. And so my first reaction is, how do I get out of here? To get out of the apartment, the front door was directly in front of me, about 10 feet, and I would have to go to that door, open it up, and I'd have to pass where they were standing. So I couldn't get out the front door. I started screaming, and I'm loud. Mike, I'm loud. I started screaming and I started crying, and I was sinking. I remember feeling myself sinking into the couch, pushing myself into the couch, almost melting into the couch and I'm thinking, okay, the neighbor next door knows what's going on somewhat. The people upstairs there's been some really weird stuff with the upstairs, but between me screaming and the crying, I knew that I was hopeful that someone would come and they would, whatever those things were, they would leave.
Right.
Wasn't happening. Did not happen. So I just going to be straight with you and tell you in a nutshell how this ended. My heart was pounding so hard that I knew in my soul, in my spirit, that I was going to have a cardiac arrest. I knew I was going to die that night.
Wow.
No, I knew.
Yeah.
This was too much. This was for me. This was like, I understand that people actually go as far as talking to these things and like having interactions. That wasn't going to, that was something I couldn't deal with. So I was like, at what point are they going to just come through the glass and through the blinds into the apartment? I mean, so much stuff had happened. That was basically the next step. At the moment that I can tell you that I was going to take my last breath, I remember crying out, and I said, Jesus. I was just crying. I said, Jesus, 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 help me. Mike, the kitchen was to my left, and I remember seeing something out of the corner of my eye, and I looked to my left, and I can only describe it as a hologram, because it wasn't a full 6-foot man. It was probably, I don't know, maybe a 3 to 3.5 or 4, no, 3 to 3.5 foot hologram of what we know because of pictures and illustrations of Jesus Christ. And he was standing in the kitchen, and in front of, he was standing, but he was above the ground. And as he's standing there, I can only see his profile. He was in a white robe with a brown belt of some kind. He had longer hair. I could see the profile. And before him were these entities, and I can only describe them as bitmojis, ironically enough. Not exactly, but close. And they were looking up at him, and they were crouching down as if they were frightened, or they were not having it in his presence. As I'm watching this to my left, I look back to my right to see if these entities are at the window, and they weren't. They were gone. And I remember taking my eyes, I remember rubbing my eyes together to make sure that I wasn't having a vision or a flashback or a hallucination or whatever could have been happening. I just remember doing that with my eyes. I looked back again, and he was there. And I got on my knees at that time, and I think I just cried. I just cried for hours. I just cried for hours and hours through the night. Nothing was in the house anymore. Everything had gone away. The fear, the anxiety, everything that had accumulated to this point it almost was just gone from my mind, from my heart, and from my life. And I remember turning on the television, and we had Chromecast where you can stream things from your from different applications to your television. And I remember going to pull up stuff about Jesus, because that's where I was. I just remember looking up something about Jesus at the time. And the first thing that popped up was Joseph G. Jordan testimonial of alien abduction. And the caption was permanently stopped by the name and authority of Jesus Christ. And I was just like, this is insane.
Yes.
I remember playing the video, and this was, I believe he was at a UFO symposium speaking, and it was, believe the year, it was an older one at the time. I believe it was from 2003 or 2004 from Roswell. And he's telling his testimony, and I'm watching it, and he's telling me about C4, his ministry, his relationship with MUFON. He started, and then at the end of the testimony, he said, "I not only am I telling you this because of my experience, but I'm going to bring up some real life living testimony." So he starts bringing people up from the back. They start coming up. I was able to stop this by the name and authority of Jesus Christ. Next person, name. I mean, he brought it. It must have been. They just kept coming. They just kept coming. People, and I was just overwhelmed with I was thankful. I knew that I had come. I knew that the Lord had come back to my life after 29 years, and I knew that He had saved me at the final hour. And I remember Katie coming home from Arizona, and I remember telling her the story. And we ended up going to the CE4 Research Group webpage and printing out, if your audience ever goes to this website, there's these 8 R's of freedom. I'm not going to really get into them now, but they're just bullet points of things that you can read coming out of being an experiencer to remind you of what not to do. Don't pay attention to these things. You renounce that. Denounce that. There's certain bullet points that I do encourage anyone who's had experiences like this, going through experience like this, or the experience that just started, or people who are going through something traumatic that they can't find help. Definitely, that website and our book, obviously, is something that is a great resource, because you're not getting my opinion, you're getting my testimony, you're not getting Joe's opinion, you're getting his research, and you're also getting 60 or 70 plus testimonies that are new, plus the 600 that he's collected over the last 25 years. So so Katie printed these 8 R's out, and she posted them all over the apartment. She had them in the bed, the bathroom, the mirror. So every time I got up every day, in the kitchen, everywhere, they would remind us of what had happened. So we ended up, I ended up go back to church, the church, ironically enough, that I grew up in. And Katie wasn't really on board with it at the time, but she and I didn't press it on her. I was just focused on, I knew I needed to be close to Jesus, and I needed to be around believers, and I needed to be hearing His word. It didn't matter where it was or what it was. I needed it, and I needed it all the time. So I was going to the Wednesdays, the Sunday, wherever I could go. And so over a few weeks, she started coming on her own accord, and I started to see a change in her, which was absolutely magnificent. And we ended up, shortly after this whole thing had happened, moving and leaving that place, because I believe that whole area that we ended up moving in I believe there was a lot of occult things happening. I believe there was witchcraft. I believe I was drawn there by the enemy. I believe that I do believe in cosmic geography, and I do believe that was something that drew me to a really, really bad spot. So we bolted out of there. We ended up at a church that I had gone to years before when I tried to come back to Christ. And I rededicated my life to Christ. She rededicated her life to Christ. We started serving at this church in Costa Mesa, getting there at 7 o'clock in the morning, putting the chairs up. It was a pop-up church, about 150 people, putting things together, helping, whatever we could do. I mean, I just needed to serve. It was a 2-year position where we ended up getting married. We felt convicted as a couple that no more living together, no more sexual immorality. I was going to change my life, and I was going to do it for Him because what He did for me. And for the first time in my life, I knew who Jesus really was, and He really saved me in a way that made me opened my mind up to the Bible in a way that I had never seen the Bible before, where it was a history. Right. It's a history book. Like Joe says, it's two things. It's a love story, about Jesus. It's all about Jesus, the revelation of Jesus Christ, but it's also a cosmic battle between good and evil.
Yeah,
It's two stories in one. And so when people know these things, you can go back, and when you read the scriptures, you can really find out and understand that this is something that's tangible, that any questions we have as humans, whether it's something geographic, whether it's something, whether it's a bloodline, whatever it may be, from Genesis to Revelation, that book is a history book. It is the only history book that's going to give people the truth of their existence, where they came from, the lineage of where they've come from, why things have happened, and what ultimately our responsibility is as humans, and why he created us. And just going to Bible studies throughout the weeks and serving and starting, I'm a musician, so they started having me play guitar at a Bible study. And I was playing for 2 years. I'm playing and I'm learning all these worship songs, and I'm just like glorifying God. Like I never thought my life could be like this. So a couple of years passed, and this was, and we're getting towards the end of the story. I ended up, we moved out of Costa Mesa, and I moved back to Huntington with her, and things have never been better. I ultimately had this pull on me that, like, someday. I had tried to reach out to Joe to thank him through the course, I would say, between 2016 and so 2016 when this all went away, and 17, 18, 19. So for 4 years, there were a few times where I thought, how do we track him down personally so that I can thank him? I just want to hug him and
right.
say, God put you in my life in a miraculous way, and I want to thank you. So I was at home here in April of last year, and I was watching him, and he was on a show on YouTube, and he was being interviewed from Gilbert. Was it David Gilbert, I believe? And he was doing an interview with Joe, and Joe was in South Korea, and I thought, wow, he's in South Korea. This is amazing. So I'm watching this interview, and I'm just thinking, this is awesome. And he's still doing the same thing. He's still speaking the name of Christ, and he's still telling people about how they can be delivered from any type of oppression, whether it's drug addiction, whether it's alien abduction, which obviously we know is demonic, being in the occult, witchcraft, whatever it may be. The solution, right, is Jesus. And so I was like, man, this is amazing. At the end of this interview, he left his contact information. So I sent him a quick on my phone. I sent him a quick email today. Quick synopsis. Obviously, I condensed it considerably. Just, I want to thank you. I just want to thank you. I love you, and God, it's just done so much for me in my life. Send the email. Within a half hour, I get a call from Florida, where I knew that he originally was, but he was in South Korea, so I didn't answer the phone. This is the spam call. He ends up leaving a message. Hey, it's Joe Jordan. Give me a call back. I called the number back. We end up talking, Mike, for probably 2.5, 3 hours.
Wow.
And we went on and on and on, and just I gave him everything. He gave me what he gave me, and he said, listen, I don't know if I'm coming back to the States. I'm here on a military contract, and I'm a safety coordinator, and I don't know how we may stay. I may not come back. And I'm getting older, and I'm thinking about having a representative for C4 research, someone who can be the face of C4 in the States, as well as I'm thinking about compiling this book, and I want to know if you want to be a part of it and be a co-author. And I'm thinking, hey man, I was like, I just called you to tell you thank you. I'm not about a book or about all this stuff. I said, maybe you need to pray about it, and maybe we need to take some time. And he says, I don't need to pray about it. It's already done. And here we go. I don't know. I think this was published in April, May, June, July. I think we published this. This was published it was published on July 7th of 2020. And we not only have the book available on Amazon, Piercing the Cosmic Veil. Actually, it's available anywhere. But we published it. Obviously, I've been doing interviews like this about my testimony and about my story. And we also ended up starting our own recently YouTube channel called the Piercing the Cosmic Veil Show.
Yeah, I've been there a couple times.
Yeah, we thought instead of having people, it's great to have their stories in print, but how much more impactful would it be if the audience could see people and really listen to them and see the testimony in real life. So it's been a blessing. We've only done a few. We've got a couple lined up for this year already, and I'm going to work on that later this afternoon. But that's my story. I don't really know what to say except that I am just where I've come and where I'm at now. I just want the audience to know that the reason I've done a lot of these interviews and I've done a lot of testimonials, and I'm not going to lie, it's exhausting. I do it because I know that it's my purpose, because I know that through my testimony, people will be saved. And that's not of me. That's because the Lord does the work. I'm just
right.
But to know that I have a purpose now, to where before I was just wandering, I could never get anything right my whole life. You know, I go do this and do that. And what is, you know, always searching. But for the first time in my life, to be able to have a purpose, to be able to be a part of a ministry that has resources, whether it's the book or whether it's you go to the web pages or whatever it may be, to be able to be there for somebody who was in my position and have them have a resource, have them get out of it sooner or have them stop it before it happens, then that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I just want to thank everybody and give the glory to God.
Yeah. I got one question I wanted to ask you. I don't know if you know the answer or not, but that area you was in, would you say it was centered in a triangle?
You know, Mike, it very well could have. I will tell you this. Something real bad was going on there. There was prostitution in that complex. It was over the 5 freeway. It was in a very, very seedy part of town. There was drug trafficking going on. There was a spirit of darkness in conjunction to what was happening to me, that a level of evil that I had never witnessed in my life. And when we got out of there, hey, we left stuff behind. We couldn't get out there sooner enough.
Right. The reason why I asked you that is because globally there are areas that have a triangle, where within that area, a lot of crazy stuff happens, you know.
That makes sense. I believe that for sure.
They got one in Alaska. I'm sure they have quite a few triangle type strongholds in different areas of the city and stuff. Because, you know, when I lived in Baltimore, it's like when I would ride towards Baltimore, I would almost see a veil of darkness over it. And I said to myself, am I the only one seeing this? And I kept talking to people, do you see that when you go into Baltimore? And they go, yeah, Mike, I see it too, you know? And I said, well, I know I'm not crazy now, but, you know, when I started looking at the whole triangle theory, they got a triangle in Alaska where they got all kind of supernatural weird stuff going on there. And then, of course, everybody knows about the Bermuda Triangle, you know, then, but we have these triangle strongholds globally, you know, that just, and every now and then somebody will document and show the rest of the world that look at this triangle, you know, and this is I don't know if I should say this, but I have to because you brought up Baltimore. You're going to find, I find this really intense. So is my wife. When I was during the craziness of all this, I couldn't find a job. I mean, I'd go to an interview, or people would never respond back. It was this, it was eerie the way people would ghost me, as if once I made contact with people, somebody else got involved in, like, you can't talk, like, it was impossible. But one thing I remember during the job search, because I think I was unemployed for 13 or 14 months. One thing that happened was I had all those job searches set up via the applications and what have you, but I started getting job offers from Maryland. I mean, I'm in Southern California, and I remember telling Katie, all these people kept responding back to me from Maryland. I thought, what is going on with Maryland? Wow.
I thought that was a really weird thing. And she's going to find this fascinating, because it was like, it was uncanny how many connections were coming after me. Like, would you be willing to relocate? Things like that. And I was like, why Maryland? But I just find that really, really weird that you said that. One of the things I want to kind of end with for your audience, and I'm sure you've gone over this with them as well, through this whole experience from 2013 to today, one of the scriptures personally that I'd like to share with the audience that stuck with me,
Okay.
and that I think is very important for people who are wrestling with something like this, or who have questions or anything. But obviously your audience and you're going to know why this passage is important to me, because it's directly reflective of my life and what I've experienced. And that's Ephesians 6, starting in verse 10. It says a final word. It says, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on all of God's armor so that you'll be able to stand firm against the strategies of the devil. For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against the evil rulers and the authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places. Therefore, put on every piece of God's armor so you'll be able to resist the enemy in the time of evil. And you know, when that scripture came to me, obviously that just gave me the green light to say, okay, I'm going to take the word of God now, and I'm not going to look at it as a story anymore. And I'm not looking at this thing as a parable. Although there are parables in it, I'm looking at this thing and I'm going to dig in and figure out, because this has the answers. And in the last 4 to 5 years, Mike, I'll tell you, the revelations that have come to me in regards to my experience and what we are going to be, what the church and what us humans are up against in these very short, in these upcoming months, very well these upcoming years. I really do have a feeling that the things that I witness, that other people are going to, and if anybody out there has been paying attention, obviously the sightings since this happened to me have more than quadrupled, and it's documented and you can find them all over the place. And as these things start to manifest themselves, and as these things we start to dig deeper into the tribulation and what have you, I just want people to understand that as these things come upon the earth, and whether the government or whomever wants to tell people that these are our benevolent ancestors from the stars and they've seeded us and they're here to solve the coronavirus, they're here to solve the corrupt politicians, they're here to solve the world, and here's our savior. I want people to remember that the reason that this happened to me, and the reason that the enemy used this particular thing to steer me away from making that connection with Christ, is because he will use whatever he knows he can use to shift you from paying attention to him and to look elsewhere. So, Joe and I talk about the churches. The churches don't want to talk about this. They don't want to address these things. And one of the questions to pastors are, have you seen UFO stickers or UFO air fresheners or, UFO tall gray? I mean, you see this imagery all over the world. It's very popularized. They've manufactured the UFO abduction alien thing into a marketing scheme, which I believe has a huge effect through lesser magic. And I believe it is affecting people. And I think it's extremely important, and it's extremely unsettling to know that the churches as a whole don't want to address these things, when I think now is a critical time in which the season we're entering may be a time that if you're not prepared, a man's heart may fail from things that are coming upon this earth soon. Right. So I don't know. Listen, all I know is that Jesus Christ set me free. And I know that if anyone is ever in a spot where they are filled with fear, or they are in a situation that they don't have any way out, that the name of Jesus Christ, the authority of that name, will stop anything from happening to you and will eliminate fear and can save you from darkness. And it could be in any way, shape, or form, any oppression that you're under. obviously going away from Christ and unbelievers, and you watch the Netflix and you hear the television, you look at the society and how we glorify the enemy, we glorify Lucifer, we glorify darkness, we glorify evil, we glorify horror. Be careful with what you're doing out there. Exactly. Be cognizant of your surroundings. Mm-hmm. Understand that this is not a flesh. It's not flesh and blood. That there is an unseen realm that is affecting us directly, and people need to really be aware of this. And again, I'm just thankful again for the opportunity to be on here. I know you had Joe on a couple times, I believe, recently. Yeah.
I had him on twice. I had him on the first time, and I said to myself, I got to get this guy back because here's how my story goes. It kept me so, the topic was always interesting to me because at one time I was one of those pastors that believed that Ezekiel was about a UFO. Okay, first chapter. And then I started thinking about it and come to the realization, wait a minute, God doesn't need a UFO to fly around in. So I rejected that whole idea altogether. And then through my own personal studies, I started seeing that the UFO folks are trying to say that we're put on this planet by, E.T. and friends. I said, that doesn't make any sense because God created the heaven and earth and everything in it, Right. So I started seeing, from a theological perspective, a connection to the appearance of the UFOs and Christians being lifted up. Connect the dots. Yeah. Connect the dots. So I said, okay, there's some stuff going on here based on some events that are supernatural that frame certain doctrines that we have, certain theological doctrines. And if you just kind of look around, it'll hit you like a flashing light. Why are certain doctrines created to mean certain things that require us to be lifted up out of here, And when you think about it, I said to myself, okay, something's connected here, because I first said to myself, okay, this is connected to UFOs. Then my brain said, Mike, it doesn't make any sense, let it go. Then it jumped back on me again, and then the Lord said, Mike, go deeper into it, because he wired me a certain way to be open, That's how he wired me. I've always been open to stuff. I was always willing to do the research, and I was always to say, okay, I'm going to find out if something's true or false one way or another. And that's how I do my theology. I'm going to find out if it's true or false one way or another, And whatever road it takes me, I'm there,
I appreciate that about you, and I thank you, Lord. Bless his ministry, because, and you and I both know that I can understand. You're a pastor. You've got your 501c3. You've got a congregation. You're bringing in a salary. You're doing the Lord's work. But I can only imagine that there becomes a time in a pastor's life where he has to determine: are you going to dig into end times? Are you going to dig into Revelation? Are you going to dig into the unseen realm? Are you, Michael Heiser? Are you going to dig a little deeper into the biblical narrative that maybe isn't looked at, but yet can really, because of the season, needs to be shown to the congregations so that their eyes can be open to a greater picture of what's happening.
Right.
I can understand that in a man's heart, he may think, I may lose people because we're going into a realm, into an area that's a little bit dangerous. And I understand that. However, what were we called to do, right? We're all going through a time in life that no man or woman has ever experienced right now. We've never experienced this before. We're called to do two things: to love the Lord God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love our enemies as ourselves. But we're also called to spread the Great Commission. We're the people, forget the church, forget your church, my church, our church. Mm-hmm. We are the people of the way, and the body of Christ is us. It's us together. It's us people. We don't need, the Lord doesn't need buildings. He doesn't need works. He doesn't need a law. We have the law written on our heart, and it's all in the Word. So I'm just thankful to, again, meet you and to know that you're willing and open to receive stories like this. And I hope that it edifies and encourages people and opens people's eyes. And I know one thing, that the Lord, as much as I don't like to do these things, if I'm going to be candid, and I'm getting, sometimes I wonder how much longer do I want to do this?
I know.
But every time I feel that way, I've learned in the past few years that when I don't want to do something, when I don't want to go to that men's Bible study, or I don't want to go perform again at church because I'm just burnt out. The times that I don't want to do something is when he uses me the best and I get the most connection from him.
Right. Exactly. I understand that, because before we end this episode, I want to say this one thing. This is very important. When you're at a crossroads, okay, and the enemy sees that you're about to go with Jesus, the enemy says, okay, it's time to get the artillery out. I'm gonna hit this guy, male or female, with everything I can to stop them from going to the Lord. Because once you get with the Lord, you become a weapon that can be utilized against Satan in his realm. You see.
Amen. Amen.
And a lot of people don't understand that. That's why you got people who are like, they're kind of like straddling the fence, you know.
Yep.
They go, I got a little bit of sin in my life, but it ain't like I'm robbing banks, but it's still sin. When you think how holy, holy, holy God is, you know.
Right.
And when you start understanding that everybody that got in his presence, they went face down, he's that holy, you know.
Yes,
and then God stood them up. He never talked to them while they was laying down. He always stood them up, you know. He wants you to stand, period. He wants you to stand. And when you stand for Christ, you can bet you got 1,000 angels in full gear, ready to back you up against those demonic forces, you know.
Absolutely, so, and there's going to be a target on your back, and
yes.
And again, the full armor of God. I have not. I don't think there may have been a handful of times when I have not left my home without in my morning meditation and prayer putting on the belt of truth, the sandals, the shod, the sandals of peace. I take peace wherever I go. The breastplate of righteousness, the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is word, and the shield of faith. And what does he ask us to do? He doesn't ask us to fight. He asks us to stand. But we have to be prepared and equipped to stand, because we're going to have a target on our back as long as we're doing this. But you know what? I don't care. I don't care if I have a target on my back, because I know that what I've in the 48 years I've been alive, I've been, most of the time, whether it's been indoctrination in the schools or the system in which we live in, I've lived a lie. I've lived a lie.
Yeah,
I really have. You know, and if I need to speak the truth, and I can bring, if God can use, if he can use me to bring one soul to Christ, amen, amen.
Exactly.
Then my life was worth it. Then his purpose for me was worth it.
Exactly. Well, Jason, you know, I thank you again for sharing your testimony with me. It is something that just let me know why God wired me the way he wired me. Because I always ask God, I said, why you wired me this way, Lord? Why can't you just make me be a normal, you know, get the Bible up, hallelujah Christian, and that's the end of the day. And then I come to realize, they said, no, son. No. You got other stuff to do.
No, it's true. It's true. No, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on. You're in your ministries, and you're in Florida, correct?
I'm in Georgia.
You're in Georgia. Okay, in Georgia. Yeah. That's right.
That's right. I'm in Georgia, and basically, the way things operate right now, every time I think I'm ready, God says, Mike, I need you to get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, because then I realize the battle that he wants me in is going to be one that I'm kind of like designed to do. Because once I dig in, it don't matter, because that's something I probably got from being in the Marine Corps. But once I dig in, it don't matter, and I'm ready. And my whole motto is, show me the chapter. How does it support Christianity, or how is it attacking Christianity? It's either for Christianity or against Christianity. It's either elevating the Lord Jesus Christ, or it's attacking the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. It's one or the other. It can't be both.
No, and there's, and guess what? What does he say about us, about those lukewarm Christians? What does he say about that?
Gonna spit him out of his mouth.
Right, he'll spit you right out of your mouth. And guess what? I'm going to tell you. I'll end it like this. I'm going to give a warning and a disclosure to everybody who will hear this testimony tonight, and that's this. This isn't a scare tactic. This is coming from the heart. Choose wisely.
Yep.
Choose wisely.
Exactly.
Because your eternal soul is at stake. And I'm going to tell you this right now. Those entities, those things that occurred that we didn't discuss, that he allowed me to see because he needed me to see it. You do not want to be in the presence of darkness and with the things that are not of him. There's only, you know, the road is narrow, but I'm going to tell you right now, it's worth it in the end, because this life is nothing but a vapor in the wind. Right? Blake and I were done.
I've only had a small taste of it, and it scared the garbage out of me, you know. I've only had a small taste, not even something halfway near what you've been through. And the small taste that I was confronted by was enough to say, okay, I don't need to deal with that. But, you know, I got somebody that can protect me, you know. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
And with that being said, Jason, thank you once again for sharing your testimony. I'm going to keep you in my prayers. And I'm going to say to myself, Lord, every time Jason shares his testimony, you strengthen him tenfold. Tenfold.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. God bless you. God bless your ministry. And God rules.
God bless you as well. You have a great day. Have a great year.
Thank you, too. You do the same, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.